Are we in danger of underestimating Kell Brook? Because it seems like everybody's writing him off. Eddie Hearn's writing him off. It even sounds like Dominic Ingle, his on and off trainer, isn't giving him much chance. They're all talking about Brook being at the end of his career and he's looking for this big payday, and nobody's really talking about whether Kell Brook actually stands a decent chance of winning this fight against Terence Crawford. They're talking about Brook's age. Well, isn't Terence Crawford around the same age as Brook? He might be a couple years younger, but he's in his 30s, right? Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford, just like Brook, has been out the ring for a long time by the time they face each other. Terence Crawford is a guy who's moved up through the weights. He isn't as naturally big as Kell Brook. Kell Brook struggled with discipline for a long time in his career. But for the past, 18 months, Kell Brook has looked in tremendous condition consistently. I don't remember a time when Kell Brook stayed in shape in between fights for this long. We always saw Kell Brook blowing up in weight. But now he's stayed consistent. And it's not ideal that he's not training with Dominic Ingle. I'd definitely prefer to see him with Ingle, but according to Dominic Ingle, it's just a case of logistics. Dominic Ingle's training people like Willie Hutchinson, and he doesn't want to get caught out by having to quarantine or anything like that if he travels abroad to Fuerteventura or to America. So that seems to be the situation there, rather than some massive big fallout, which is what Eddie Hearn is suggesting, because Eddie Hearn's suggesting that Kell Brook doesn't have Dominic Ingle on board right now because he don't want to pay him. But that's not what Dominic Ingle's saying. And, maybe Dominic Ingle's being diplomatic for the sake of their relationship. But then again, maybe he's just telling the truth, and Eddie Hearn is trying to leverage Ingle and use him against Brook because of the fact that Brook and Hearn have got an issue now. So anyway, I'll cover that in a separate video. But the main point I want to talk about here is the possibility that we're all underestimating Kell Brook. How many of us are actually picking Brook to win? I'm not picking him to win. I mean, if I did a poll on my YouTube channel right now, it might be, 5% of people were picking Kell Brook? Less than that? I have to imagine the vast majority are picking Terence Crawford, but Kell Brook, at welterweight, has always been a very good fighter. He beat a prime Sean Porter in Porter's backyard, and he did it comfortably. Errol Spence didn't beat Sean Porter comfortably. And I know Errol Spence beat Kell Brook, styles make fights and all that, but the point I'm making is Kell Brook was always a real top welterweight. I was, to be honest, guilty of underestimating Kell Brook even before he beat Sean Porter. I didn't really believe in him. But that night against Sean Porter, he showed me something in there. And obviously he had all those defenses of his welterweight title. He couldn't get the fights he wanted. Ended up fighting Golovkin, taking damage, coming back down in weight, fighting Errol Spence. But even in that Errol Spence fight, Kell Brook fought well. Yeah, he ended up quitting after getting another, fractured orbital bone. But he fought well. It's not like he went in there and got totally outclassed or blasted out by Errol Spence. He gave Errol Spence one of his toughest fights. Which fight for Errol Spence has been tougher? Maybe the Sean Porter fight? What other fights? I can't think now of any tougher fights that Errol Spence has had other than the Kell Brook fight. And, that was one of Errol Spence's best performances because of the fact that he managed to come from behind, wear Kell Brook down with body shots, start doing damage, fracture his eye socket, and got the win on away soil in hostile territory. So you really got to give Errol Spence maximum credit for what he did there. But again, I come back to the main point. Kell Brook was always one of the top welterweights, not an easy guy to beat. And now that he's rededicated, is Terence Crawford thinking that Brook is going to be food? Is Terence Crawford thinking that it's going to be another Amir Khan situation? Kell Brook, in this Boxing Scene article, is saying that Khan didn't believe he could win, but Crawford knows he's dangerous. Well, he might be right in saying that Khan didn't believe he could win. I saw Khan facing off with Terence Crawford in some face-to-face interview where they're in a studio both sitting down across from each other. And Khan couldn't look Terence Crawford in the eyes. This is not a stare down like at a weigh-in, because that doesn't really matter. This was like a conversation. And Khan looked visibly nervous in Terence Crawford's presence. By this time, obviously, Khan had been very inactive for years, been knocked out a bunch of times. And the confidence, just looking at the body language of both fighters, was night and day between them. Terence Crawford's confidence was off the scale compared to Khan's. And when they got in the ring, of course, Khan wasn't able to do much. He was getting hurt immediately. Crawford was very sharp. He was exploiting Khan's defensive frailties, which have always been there, and forced Khan to quit. The first time Amir Khan has quit. And I don't blame him for quitting, because Khan has shown enough heart over the years. In the Maidana fight, in the Danny Garcia fight, loads of other fights, even taking the Canelo fight. He's shown loads of heart. But eventually, see, courage for a lot of fighters is also like a well. Eventually you go to the well and there's no more courage left. The courage runs dry. That even happened to one of the greatest warriors the heavyweight and cruiserweight divisions have ever seen, Evander Holyfield. At the back end of Holyfield's career, when he fought Sherman Williams, a journeyman from the Bahamas, Holyfield quit in that fight. Now, you would have never seen a prime Holyfield quit, or even a slightly past his prime Holyfield, the guy who was fighting Ruiz and people like that. But he quit against Sherman Williams. And he didn't look like he wanted it against James Toney either. After he got dropped, he didn't look like he wanted to continue. So even a great warrior, one of the most courageous heavyweights of all time, Holyfield, towards the end when he was an old man, even his well of courage started to dry up. And that's what happened to Amir Khan. He'd been knocked out so many times and taken so many beatings. You can't blame him for quitting at that stage of his career, you know? Now, of course, Kell Brook quit as well against Errol Spence, but he had real bad injuries, or a real bad injury. And he'd already been told by a doctor following the Golovkin fight, when he also had another fractured orbital bone. He'd been told by the doctor that he was a punch or two away from going blind, from getting blinded if he kept getting hit on that fractured eye socket. And I said that at the time, that Kell Brook could have been blind, because there were some people complaining about the stoppage. I was like, are you serious? The stoppage against Golovkin? No. I said Kell Brook could have got blinded in the Golovkin fight, so his corner did absolutely the right thing. And I had some jokers. There always is some jokers. Some people were absolutely clueless. The world is full of clueless people. Let me not go further than that. But there were some jokers saying, oh, what a load of nonsense. How can a fractured eye socket result in someone going blind? I mean, but anyway, it was later confirmed by a doctor. Kell Brook came out and said the doctor told him if he kept getting hit on that fractured eye socket, he could have gone blind. So that was in his mind when he fought Errol Spence. He knew that his other eye wasn't right. Well, now he's got two bionic eyes. Now he's got titanium plates over both eyes. So the fractured eye socket issue shouldn't be a problem for Kell Brook against Terence Crawford. And on top of all that, I think Kell Brook has got the bit between his teeth now. I think Kell Brook feels slighted by Eddie Hearn. He feels slighted by Sky. He feels like nobody believes in him, like his back is against the wall. Sometimes that can work against the fighter. They can go into the fight uptight, upset, but other times it can inspire them to put in one of their best ever performances. It can sometimes do that. They can channel that frustration and actually use it in a positive way. And there's no real pressure on Kell Brook for this fight. It's on away soil. His old team has all deserted him. He feels like he's got nothing to lose. So, I don't know. Again, I'm picking Terence Crawford, but I wonder whether I'll regret that pick. Because Kell Brook is a very good fighter, very big, and he's going to be by far the hardest puncher and the sharpest operator, as far as I'm concerned, that Terence Crawford will have fought at 147. how's Terence Crawford going to react to Brook's power? Now, Terence Crawford is a much more well-rounded fighter than Brook. He's got better head movement. He switch hits. He finds better angles for my money. Brook is very upright, and he likes the straight shots. But even though he's, not as versatile as Terence Crawford, what he does well. And he does with power and speed and accuracy. Kell Brook is an accurate fighter. So, again, especially with the siege mentality that I think Brook probably has right now, if he can channel that frustration the right way, you never know, man. Maybe we could see Terence Crawford either pushed very, very close or maybe get turned over. Stranger things have definitely happened. We should all know that the world is a strange place after 2020. We should all know that. All bets are off. Anything can happen. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about the possibility that we're all underestimating Kell Brook in this Terence Crawford fight. Let me know, people.